Hello and a very warm welcome to a brand new edition of The Big Picture with me, Frank Pereira, on Rajya Sabha television. Well, the union government suffered a major setback with Uttarakhand High Court quashing President's rule in the hill state and directing ousted Chief Minister Harish Rawat to prove his majority in a floor test on April 29. The High Court also upheld the disqualification of 9 dissident Congress legislators, saying they have to pay the price for the constitutional sin of defection. But in the latest development, the Honorable Supreme Court stayed the High Court's verdict and reimposed President's rule in the state. The apex court will next hear the matter on April 27, 2 days before the floor test. Meanwhile, asserting that the centre respects the rule of law, Union Parliamentary Affairs Minister M. Venkaiah Naidu said President's rule was temporarily imposed in Uttarakhand as there was a constitutional breakdown in the hill state. On this edition of The Big Picture, we'll try and analyse the interesting situation in Uttarakhand. Joining me on the program today are R.P. Singh of the BJP, Sanjay Hegde will be joining us, Supreme Court advocate Vinod Sharma, political editor of the Hindustan Times, and K.C. Mittal of the Congress. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us on the program and being with me here on Rajya Sabha television. Vinod Sharma, I'd like to start with you, of course, and ask you, simple question, was Article 356, was that really necessary? Should President's rule have been imposed in Uttarakhand?
Well, that matter is now before the Supreme Court, and Supreme Court has given a temporary stay. On the judgment of the High Court, and the argument that fetched the stay for the government, the centre, essentially was that they were not in possession of the copies of the High Court judgment, so there could not be a proper presentation of arguments based on that judgment. So the court stayed the revocation of the presidential proclamation until 27th. And that's interesting because 29th is the day fixed by the High Court for a trial of strength on the floor of the House. The High Court's judgment was based on two seminal judgments of the Supreme Court itself. One was the Bomai case of 94 and Ramprasad case of 2005. That relating to the Bihar Assembly.
Yes.
And the Bomai case lays out very clearly that the trial of strength has to be on the floor of the House. Now, the presidential rule was imposed on the eve of the trial of strength. That was the matter which was gone into by the High Court. On the contrary, and mind you, the governor gave 8 reports, and not in one report did he talk about a breakdown of constitutional machinery or suggested imposition of President's rule. So the centre advised the president, and that led to the presidential rule in the state. And the centre's argument was based on the way the appropriation bill was passed in the assembly through a voice vote. So the Supreme Court will decide now as to whether the High Court was correct or whether the centre was correct in its wisdom in advising the president. They may side one or the other party, or there may be a balanced judgment, as we have seen today, that they have, while revoking the president, while restoring the presidential proclamation, they have put a bar on the centre that you can't revoke the presidential order in the interregnum and go to the governor to make claim to form the government. So both the parties have their hands pinned behind their back because the chief minister was apparently taking decisions in a hurry, and that was an exception because of the centre taking exception and buttressing its argument before the Supreme Court for a stay on the judgment of the High Court. That's in some ways
I see you shaking your head and you do not seem to be agreeing with what Mr. Vinod Sharma is saying. I mean, what do you want to add to it?
No, only thing is there are two things. I mean, I've gone through the today's proceeding also, and I've gone through the High Court proceeding also. Now, there's contradiction in Congress stand on two grounds. One, when the 18th of March, the assembly happened for the appropriation of the bill, they said the bill was through, bill was passed, and by majority vote. And then they disqualify the MLAs. I mean, that's contradictory. I mean, how is it possible that you can say that your members have not voted for you, and still that your appropriation bill has been passed? And that bill didn't had the assent of the governor also. I mean, it was not sent to the governor. Neither the speaker signed it, neither the chief minister signed it, and still you say that it was passed. So technically, the government was out of majority that day, and they should have resigned that very day. but they didn't resign. They said still you want to, and then later on they want to disqualify them. And I'm little. Let me take it this way that I don't go by the High Court version also when it says that the 9 dissent Congress MLAs has to pay the price of that. I mean, then if that is true, then the bill was that appropriation bill was not through that very day. I mean, there's a contradiction in the court order also for that. The other issue is even today, Congress was the one which went to the court saying that let the president rule be continued, not us. I mean, they went to the court saying that let the president rule be continued because they said that we were worried that BJP might form the government in between. They might try to revoke and in turn try to form the government. And other side, the chief minister is holding cabinet meetings and doing the work. How is it possible? Well, either you say that we want a president rule, or either you pass the other bills and other things and hold cabinet meetings. So it's just that they want to do things, they just want to cling on to power somehow. And whatever can help them to cling on to power. The fact is they have lost ground. They have lost ground, they have lost MLAs, the people, their MLAs have stopped supporting Mr. Harish Rawat, and they have lost faith in their party leadership, Mr. Rahul Gandhi, Mr. Sonia Gandhi leadership.
Okay. KC Mittal, respond to that. You know, you're desperately trying to hang on to power by some way or the other is what RP Singh of the BJP is saying.
Let me point out, I think my friend is not correct on facts and he has not been properly informed. Let me deal first issue, that is about the appropriation bill. The Speaker has signed the certificate and sent on 19th of March. It was, according to the procedure, it goes to the Legislative Department. He had already sent it. Because of the vacations, they were, I think, in between 2 days. And the Legislative Department has later on, perhaps on 28th of March, sent it to the Governor. So, to say that the Speaker did send it, the certificate was not issued is not correct. It's absolutely incorrect statement made by Mr. RP Singh. Number 2, he said, he mentions about the President's rule stayed by the Congress party. There also, it's totally misleading. When the hearing was going on in Uttarakhand High Court, the adjournment was sought by the central government for filing a counter. So, because of the apprehension that in between, in the interregnum, they were not revoked the presidential proclamation. Therefore, as this was pointed out to the court, and the Attorney General made a statement that no, we will not do it. The third point, what he says is contradictions. That's also not correct. There is no contradiction. The point is very simple. And it was argued today by Attorney General and in the court, and from our side it was argued very clearly. What is the ground? What is it because of which the presidential proclamation was imposed? Was there a failure of constitution? No. They made out 2 grounds primarily. One ground was that the appropriation bill was not passed. That's not correct. Number 2, they say the MLAs did not ask for division, but they were not allowed. That's also factually incorrect.
Okay.
That aspect has also been gone into by High Court. Beyond that, there is nothing, no more. The another aspect which they pointed out was, and other records are not perhaps given to the court, and the second is about the sting operation. We know, surprisingly, the report from the SSL on the sting was received later after the imposition, after the recommendation of the central government. How could it happen? What is all malice going on?
Okay.
I mean, it was a predetermined, well-planned that no, we don't respect constitution, we have to throw the government out, whether follow the law or don't follow the law. This is what they were doing, and they did it. That's why they face the consequences in the High Court. Supreme Court today has not gone into the merits of the case. Supreme Court was concerned with only one aspect, that the High Court has pronounced the judgment. The copies of the orders have not been provided to any of the parties. It is not even on the internet. Therefore, they are handicapped. They can't even file a proper appeal or raise their grounds or state the judgment.
Talking about the High Court and the Supreme Court, let's bring in the Supreme Court advocate into the picture. I'll let you respond, Mr. RPC. Just hold on. I'll let you respond. I'll let you respond. Let me give Mr. Hegde also a chance to speak on the program. Several things being raised there. They're saying, contradictions as far as the High Court's observation is concerned. Would you agree with that, Sanjay?
I just want to inform you exactly about what the legal procedure has been so far. What has basically happened is that the High Court asked the government advocates, can you give us an undertaking that you will not revoke President's rule and that will be nothing being done in the meanwhile? That undertaking was not given. Therefore, the High Court was forced to give an interim order. It only gave its interim order and said that the main judgment will be pronounced later.
Later, yes.
That interim order was pretty damaging and the centre had to rush to the Supreme Court. Today in the Supreme Court, the same question came up. The question came, look, we don't even have the full order of the High Court. What is it that we are in appeal against? What can the appellate court consider? So therefore, the Supreme Court has requested the High Court to give its judgment by the 26th and thereafter it will hear it on the 27th. And it has stayed. But it has also now got from the government the same undertaking which it failed to give in the High Court. The undertaking that they would not revoke President's rule and or attempt to form a government. See, ultimately, I've heard politicians continuously saying judicial overreach, courts rule India and all that. But if you politicians can't keep your house in order, if you can't rule according to the Constitution, you end up fighting in courts, this is what will happen. And the government of the day, to my mind, was ill-advised not to have given that undertaking to the High Court when it was asked for. The High Court only wanted to ensure that nothing untoward happened, that it was not faced with a fait accompli. That was not given, and therefore all this has happened.
Sharma, would you agree with that? Did the master strategists of the BJP really get it wrong in Uttarakhand?
No, may I say one thing? When you act in haste, you repent at leisure. You see, that's exactly the case here. I think Sanjay is right when he says that they did not give the undertaking because there was an undertaking existing which was, and they said it has lapsed with, it was only up to Ram Navami, I mean, they had once promised the court that they would not, revoke the presidential rule and go claim to form the government. So they failed to give that undertaking. And of course, the court came up with an order, which is currently an interim order. A detailed order will come. And once the detailed order is in place, you see, the question is, some serious questions of law will have to be decided in this case. The expanse and the reach of the Bommai judgment, in what situations can, because Bommai judgment makes, imposition of president rule justiciable. It is justiciable. So why are people so aghast that they have passed a comment on the president or they have passed a comment on the centre? Courts shall do it when they are hearing a petition which says that, look, please rule, give a ruling on this action of the centre. So I think that we must all respect the judiciary. And as my friend Sanjay, again, I agree with him, that the politicians have this tendency of apportioning their mistakes to other institutions in this country. And this will not carry on anymore, but people know. We are living in a very well-informed society and people are watching every word and reading every word of what's happening. By the 27th, the situation will be clear as to who was in the wrong and who was in the right. And we'll have a good judgment, I hope, from the Supreme Court this time, which will set everything, all speculation at rest.
RP Singh has been listening patiently, so I'm going to pose another question to him as well. What was the need to act in haste, RP Singh? Because, as far as Uttarakhand and the Congress was concerned, the Congress was imploding in Uttarakhand. Elections are due in a year's time. So if you would have waited for a year, the Congress would have laid it out on a platter to you.
Sir, issue was that there was a total constitutional breakdown on two accounts. One which I never wanted, Mr. Mittal himself did so. And I'm thankful to Mr. Mittal that he said so. One was that there's a contradiction now. They say, the bill was passed, appropriation bill was passed, and if it was passed, then they can't disqualify those 9 people. And also, not that, after that also, when it came to horse trading, it's open. And Mr. Sharma was just now saying that world is watching. Everyone watch the CM himself into horse trading. It has never happened before that CM was doing horse trading himself and poaching on, he was trying to get those MLAs back. So what is right? I mean, that need to be told, and that shows that there was a total constitutional breakdown in Uttarakhand, and that's why the president implemented there. And also, I mean, I'm sorry on the I should not comment on the High Court judgment, although it's now subject to the Supreme Court. See, even High Court, when it says that those 9 MLAs, he's not talking about those 9 MLAs at all, and plus they didn't took in consideration the sting operation, where it was categorically seen Harish Rawat poaching on the MLAs. So probably they missed on these 2 dimensions also. And then had they gone and if they have gone through that dimension or probably have considered that dimension, then probably that judgment would be different then.
You know, Sanjay Hegde doesn't agree with you. He has something
he
to
has
add.
the right to do that.
No. It's not a question of agreeing or disagreeing. It's just statements of fact. As far as the 9 MLAs who were disqualified are concerned, they are up in appeal. Their appeal is yet to be heard by the Uttarakhand High Court. That's a separate matter. The question here was the validity of the presidential proclamation.
Yes.
So, in that matter, the court had to pass a judgment. And as far as the sting operation is concerned, what the court has basically said is, a sting is not evidence. You have to have much more evidence. Secondly, the court has also said that, look, if you are to dismiss governments for solitary instances of corruption, then you'll have to dismiss all governments all over. What you can invoke 356 as a rare measure, and that rare measure is when the government of a state cannot be carried out in accordance with the constitution.
Yes.
The last time also in Arunachal Pradesh, you had a governor who said, you know, there's a cow being slaughtered outside and this and that. Small law and order instances do not amount to failure of the constitutional machinery, a breakdown of constitutional machinery. The satisfaction that the president arrives at has to be based on relevant material. The court will not go into the adequacy of the material. The court will not even go into the merits of the decision, whether this time it should have been imposed or that time. But it will definitely oversee the process.
Was there relevant material to...
Yes, that is the question, and the Uttarakhand High Court seems to have found that the material was not sufficient.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I little differ with Mr. Hegde on this. When court overlooked the 9 ML, you said, I mean, they said that 9 MLs can be talked about later on. I mean, that issue is different, and Mr. Hegde is saying that is pending. But it's the assembly. They're part of the assembly. I mean, till the time their decision is not finalized, how can you take a decision before that? I mean, you can't take a... They are
not part of the
assembly.
assembly.
If they are not part of...
Just one minute.
One at a time, please, gentlemen. One at a time.
Just 1 minute. When you... Supposing I am disqualified as a lawyer, I can't go back to court unless I am requalified or that order is set aside. How is it to be set aside? It has to be set aside by court. That proceeding is pending.
Okay, if they are disqualified, then the government was not in state after 18th of March. I mean, the government, the chief minister should have resigned. Congress should have packed up their house on 18th of March, because then if you go by you, then there was no government. Then they have no right. But there's a contradiction there, and court didn't consider this contradiction. Whether those, I mean, if the appropriation bill was passed, if we go by the Congress, then those MLAs are still MLAs. And if you say, no, we disqualified them, then your appropriation bill didn't pass. It can be one way, it can be both ways. And same, I'm saying, Congress is somehow trying to cling on to the government. Somehow, I mean, that's why Mr. Harish Rawat has to pass out he held cabinet meetings and passed some resolutions. He was a little haste also. Not us, they were in haste, passing resolutions and calling for cabinet meeting, which he was not authorized. Till the time the judgment came in, I mean, you said judgment is announced. No one has a copy of the judgment till date.
Okay. Sanjay, do you want to respond to that before I go?
I just want to clarify. I am not for the Congress. I am not for the BJP or anyone. I am only telling you what the legal process was and how a court considers it. Okay. And if the court is considering the issue of whether president's rule has validly been imposed, this was the reasoning, why, according to the media reports, as to why it had to intervene and pass an emergency interim order when it was not given the undertaking that it wanted.
No, indeed. Okay. No, let's take it forward. I'll bring in the Congress representative. I'll let you respond. RP Singh, I'll let you respond. Let me bring in KC Mittal as well into the picture now, because he's been waiting patiently on the sidelines. You know, Mr. Mittal, one observation that everyone has made here is, keeping your house in order. As far as Uttarakhand or Arunachal Pradesh itself was concerned, even the Union Minister, of course, Ravi Shankar Prasad, said a couple of weeks ago that the issue is not really the BJP's issue. It is for the Congress to keep its house in order. The Congress has not been able to keep its house in order, and that's why these problems really have arisen. Well, we seem to have lost the line there with KC Mittal of the Congress. But yes, Mr. R.P. Singh, you were saying something.
Sir, had the court confined itself to the imposition of president rule, I mean, we still would have been acceptable. We are going to the Supreme Court. But the court categorically stated, and I state by the court thing, 9 dissenting Congress MLA have to pay the price of constitutional sin. I mean, what constitutional sin? But you are saying
Constitutional sin of defection is what the High Court is saying.
But is Congress treating them as defected? Then if they are treating them as defected, then the bill was not true. Then they should have considered this also part. Then how? And if the bill was not true, then there is no validity of the government there. But
yes.
Court didn't consider all their points. And that's what I'm saying. So if your court was not confined to only the validity of the president rule, it was talking about the MLAs also.
But as Sanjay Hegde is pointing out, he's saying that they are two different items altogether and they have to be dealt with differently. Is that correct, Sanjay?
High Court intervened and answered.
They are being dealt with in different sequences. There is why the sequence involving their requalification or the challenge to disqualification is being heard, and it will be heard by first the single judge, then the division bench, and probably to the Supreme Court. Here, in the context of the challenge to the presidential rule proclamation, the High Court seems to have made certain observations as far as the 9 MLAs are concerned. That also probably as a consequence of some arguments like this. No, I'm just reading into the High Court's paraphrase because we don't have the back.
Yes.
We don't have the full judgment as yet. But what the High Court probably means is, yes, nine of you defected, 9 of you were disqualified. If you sinned, you sinned. If you get redemption later, you get redemption later from another bench or from us. But that's later. Today, we are concerned only with the question of President's rule, and given the fact that there may be a change of circumstances which will overtake this judgment, so therefore an interim order was passed, or the operative portion of the order was passed, and the final judgment is due.
Indeed. I'm told we are rejoined by KC Mittal of the Congress. Let me just quickly go to him before I get R.P. Singh to respond to everything that Sanjay Hegde is saying here. KC Mittal, one observation that everyone's made here on the panel is the fact that, the Congress hasn't been able to keep its flock together, be it in Arunachal Pradesh, Uttarakhand, or maybe even in Himachal Pradesh going forward. Now, the Congress is struggling to keep its flock in order. And that's why it's not the BJP's problem, really. It's up to the Congress to keep its MLAs together.
No, before I go to that, let me point out 2 things. It's not an interim order. Uttarakhand is final order. Number 1. Number 2, my friend Mr. R.P. Singh said constitutional breakdown. I have admitted. I have said so. No, that's not the correct part. This is what they have alleged. And the court has held, there are no sufficient grounds for imposition of presidential rule. Therefore, the High Court has quashed and set aside the presidential order. Number 2, I had pointed out what are the broadly grounds which they have pleaded before the High Court, making them basis for imposition of the presidential rule, which are insufficient, not in accordance with the judgment in the case of Bombay, and not meeting the requirements of the judgment of the Supreme Court. Therefore, the High Court has passed that order, which is absolutely on merit perfect. Number 2, you say about Arunachal, I can tell you one thing. You remember long back there was something known as Ayaram Gayaram. And the BJP is indulging in this kind of unconstitutional activities, and they are destroying the basic democracy in India. I am prepared to debate separately on this issue. I know what they did in Arunachal Pradesh. How many of the MLAs they were brought in Gurgaon and kept them? What have they been doing? What are they doing? They're destroying the...
Mr. Mittal, I'm running out of time. I'm running out of time on the program, so I'm very quickly going to get my other guests, and I'll give the final word to you as well. R.P. Singh, beginning with you, very quickly, your final comments.
I thought you will give me a final word, but anyhow. Mr. Mittal, you're probably forgetting. It's not only Arunachal and Uttarakhand. Mr. Mittal, you were
Let
speaking.
him complete.
Don't forget,
Mr. K.C. Mittal, let him
simply
complete.
because you are in power, you can do anything and everything. That's not the law. Mr. Singh,
let
you
him
must
complete
understand
first.
the basic fundamentals of the Constitution of
Mr.
India.
Mittal,
Nobody
your
seems to
party
be-
One at a
MLAs have
time,
lost
gentlemen,
faith
please.
in your
We'll
Sonia
discuss
Gandhi and
and
Rahul
we'll
Gandhi today. Let's admit that. That's happening in Punjab, that's happening in Himachal, that's happening in Kerala also. Your leadership, your MLAs, your state leaders have lost faith in the national leadership now. Let's be clear on
You know,
this.
before we get-
Sometime back, Mr. Captain Amrinder Singh used to say that I don't have faith in Mr. Rahul Gandhi.
Before we get out of hand, before we let the debate get out of hand, I would like the neutral voice on my debate to have a final word on the program and close the debate for us.
Well, this is the first time that a High Court has struck down a presidential proclamation. The doctrine in Bombay, which the Supreme Court declared nearly 2 decades ago, was a doctrine. It never was. The teeth in that doctrine were never applied. This is the first time that it is applied. So, therefore, good constitutional law will emerge out of this crisis.
Supreme Court has gone ahead on it, and then had they accepted High Court's order, then they would not entertain the intervention now.
No,
okay,
every
quickly,
question,
Sanjay.
let's
One at a time.
Let's wait for Supreme Court order.
every big case, the Supreme Court will look at it.
No, obviously, let's wait for Supreme Court order.
You know what, gentlemen, I'm completely out of time on this edition of The Big Picture. Thank you so much, R.P. Singh, Sanjay Hegde and K.C. Mittal for being with us on this program and putting things into perspective for us. That's all the time we have on this edition of The Big Picture. Thank you so much for watching. See you again next time.